Welcome to the Crucible! This is episode 6, and I'm Tiny Grimes, and I am joined this week by Neil, the real deal. And Neil, when we nicknamed you the real deal, we meant like the real deal as in you're good, but since you're kind of involved with film, do you spell it R-E-E-L?
I've considered that. I've considered doing plays on my name with R-E-E-L, but I don't know. It feels a little too easy, a little too low-hanging fruit, so I'm going to stick with the real deal that others have christened me with.
Okay, all right, that's fair. I like grabbing low-hanging fruit, so I was all ready to go for it. But you being the highbrow man that you are, I can see how you wouldn't go for that. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
So, so we were playing some Keyforge just now, and something was really confirmed for me that I've been thinking for a while, and that is my favorite kind of Keyforge is actually when there are two decks that are missing the upper echelons of the power curve. And what I mean is this. I had a Logos deck. It was a solid deck. I had 2 wild wormholes. I had bunches of good cards, but I did not have library access. And had this deck had library access, I think it would have been very one-sided for me to like play library access, craft this hand with like 2 wild wormholes, and just go totally crazy. It just felt really good not having that card in the game, knowing that I was not going to have to feel bad at some point when it was like, we've got a good game, and then I played 14 cards in one turn, and Neil was like, what just happened? So I kind of liked that, and Neil's deck had 1 Hunting Witch, mine had no Hunting Witches, so the Witch had a mild impact, but it wasn't like Witches dominated the game. It just felt like a back-and-forth game of Keyforge. What'd you think, Neil?
Yeah, it was a pretty solid back-and-forth game. It wasn't as good as it could have been because I ended up losing, but
I concur with that.
it was a good back-and-forth game. We both got to play some interesting cards, have some pretty big turns, have some pretty small turns. So it was fun.
Yeah, and I've also realized I like this game better when neither player is playing Shadow.
Yeah, that I totally agree with.
It's just like I could get to 6 and think there's a decent chance I'm going to be able to forge a key unless Neil has something really interesting he can do. And the same with Neil. It was like, uh-oh, Neil got to 6. Oh, man, I've got Dexter in my hand, but then it would be the only Logos card I can play. So I'm making these really tough decisions instead of like, Neil's at 8, but that's fine. I'm Shadows. Whoop, 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 whoop. Neil's at 4. Like, it just felt more honest.
Yeah, you still had a lot of annoying effects that were capturing and stealing and reducing my amber, including making me lose 5 amber when I was at 10.
Yeah. So
that you could steal it away on the final turn with no creatures in play to my 4 creatures in play.
Yeah. That was an amazing combo. So what Neil did is the board was full of creatures. Neil had like maybe 9 creatures, and I had 5. And Neil played the card that destroys all the well, first he played Loot the Bodies. So every creature of mine that dies, he gets an amber. He wipes the board, has to gain 3 chains to do it, but it doesn't matter because he's at like 1,000,000 amber. And then I played a card I didn't even know existed in Sanctum, which says each player loses, or each player above 6 is dropped down to 5. And so Neil's amber just got wiped out. I lost 0 amber in the process. I was able to get to 6 and steal the game right out from underneath Neil's nose.
Ugh, the worst.
That's interesting you say the worst, because I say the best. It felt so good. And then remember, like, you would play something like, Neil, did you take your amber? And you're like, no, I didn't, thanks. And I'm like, that's cool. You could take 10 million amber. I don't even care. So good.
Yeah.
So good. But Neil did get to play, what's that guy's name? Chorda something? Chorda Hazri, the Untamed dude that lets you make keys out of the Keyforge phase, and so that was cool. He had 2 of those in his deck, along with what is it called? Keyforge? Is it called Keyforge? That can't be right.
No, it's where is that? It's called Key Charge.
Key Charge. Okay, so he had 3 ways to make keys out of the Keyforge phase. So it felt like we had lots of really good cards that did cool stuff, but we didn't have the totally over the curve broken cards, which kind of ruined games. So I felt like these two decks would be fun decks. Like if Neil and I bought these two decks and that's all we had for a month or something, I think we'd have a lot of really fun close games.
Yeah, I would play those decks against each other again for sure.
Yeah. Do you know which deck you played? Because I don't know what that guy.
I remember it was called like Scholar Who Ruins the World or something along those lines.
Because it's me.
That's
why
you
I
were a little
remembered it.
jealous for that name.
Yeah, but it had Mars in
I
it,
have
so I have no interest in the deck.
no idea what yours was called.
Yeah.
It had Mars, so it was a amazing deck, and I loved it.
Yeah, so this is going to be something interesting when Neil's on the show. You're going to have basically the polar opposite views on Mars. I consider Mars to be by, I don't know if I want to say a wide margin because I don't like Brobnar either, but I think those are the two houses that bring up the rear. I do think there's going to be a totally busted Mars deck with Logos, archiving cards, but generally speaking, if I just open a Mars deck, I'm going to be like, ugh, that was unfortunate. But you think the opposite, right, Neil?
I love Mars. They fit my play style a lot. In Game of Thrones, my main card game, I like playing a lot of Targaryen, who has all of these effects where you get to ready your cards all the time. And I love that Mars has those sorts of effects, ways that you can bring stuff in ready and cheat your tempo that way. And I also really enjoy their sort of crazy combo-y sort of stuff. I love games where there's a card that like returns all Mars cards to hand, both yours and your opponent's, that can lead to some really crazy shenanigans. And so I love all of that sort of Mars stuff, and it fits my play style. I like Brobnar a lot too. I haven't looked enough at their cards, but I generally like sort of attacking my opponent and being proactive and sort of burning their board down. So Brobnar seems like it also fits my playstyle.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, Shadows fits my playstyle of wanting to kind of sit back, react, control, annoy, but it feels broken. Like, I feel like whenever I play Shadows, I'm always like, ugh, this doesn't feel right. Like, we're not really playing Keyforge. This poor bastard is playing a non-Shadows deck, and I'm playing Shadows. This just doesn't feel fair to me. So, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe
How do you feel about Maybe. How do you feel about Untamed? How do you feel they fit your play style?
I feel like Untamed, and we're going to do more about Untamed in a bit, that they are a support faction that, like, to me, decks are defined by things like Shadows, maybe Mars. Like, Mars makes it kind of a combo deck. Shadows makes it a reactive steel deck. Dis makes it kind of like a control-y deck. I feel like Untamed kind of complements whatever it is you're doing, right? You're putting some creatures on the board, you've got some control effects, you've got some amber making effects. So I love Untamed. I feel like whenever I have Untamed in a deck, I'm happy, but I don't feel like that's what defines the deck, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to ask you this. I've already made my proclamations, but can you rank the houses from your most favorite to least favorite?
So this is based on my enjoyment of the house, not my perceived strength.
I would say mix them together. Like, if something's really strong but you hate playing them, maybe you mentioned that. I don't know.
Okay. I think at the top, for me, is Mars. Because I really enjoy playing them.
That was a great episode of Welcome to the Crucible. We'll see you next week.
And I'm sure Tiny will have me back all the time.
Never again.
So Mars, I think, is at the top. I think there's a lot of really cool potential there, and I really enjoy playing them. Next, I think, is probably Shadows. I think that I like the theme of Shadows. I think shadowy, sneaky things are kind of cool. And I think that they're very, very strong. So I put them as number 2. I'd say maybe is number 3. They have a lot of really, from what I've seen, a lot of strong control cards.
Did you
but
say
also, Dis,
All
yeah.
right, let me stop you for just a second and say, would your ideal deck then be Mars, Shadows, Dis if you wanted to win a tournament?
Uh, yeah, I think that that's definitely a combination that I would be interested in rocking.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that Mars and Shadows are definitely in my ideal deck. The third one I think is a little open for me personally.
Okay. That's fair.
So going on from those three, I'd say that maybe Logos is next. They've got a lot of combo potential and can break some rules in interesting ways. Then maybe Untamed, then Brobnar, and then Sanctum.
Okay.
Brobnar I just haven't played a ton, which is
Sure.
part of why I put them lower, so I haven't been super impressed by the little bit that I've seen, and so that's kind of where I'm at.
All
But
right.
who knows?
Our rankings are sort of similar. I guess I'll just go over mine real quick just to have a foil for you. I think Shadows is the best by a pretty wide margin. I think Logos is second best because when it has its best cards, it's really, really strong. It's like a way to fuel your other factions, but it's so good at that support role that I just feel like if I have Logos in a deck, I'm always happy. Like when we
I
did
could see that.
we got our random decks, and I just saw Logos, and I was like, cool, I'm happy. Like it was Untamed Logos. I don't even know what the third faction is. I'm already happy.
Yeah.
And then for me, the next step down would probably be Untamed and Dis. I have around the same level, maybe Untamed slightly above Dis. And then I think Sanctum is almost as good, sort of depending on what they have. And then, I don't know, I'd probably put Brobnar and Mars sort of tied together on the bottom of both decks I haven't played as much, kind of like what you were saying. And then, like, they never quite have worked out for me. Like, I've seen the potential of Mars, but I never quite have a deck that has all the right pieces, or if I do, they don't come at the right time. And I feel like if I had Logos in this deck and I archived a bunch of stuff, maybe I'd see the true power. And then with Brobnar, it's just kind of like they're not bad, but they never wow me. There's a rare game where like Brobnar won that thing. It's just like Brobnar put 3 dudes down and put a little pressure on my opponent, and then they killed the dudes, and I was like, okay, cool. And then I punched one of their guys and killed it, and that was great. And then my other factions won the game for me. Generally, how it's
Yeah, I feel that. I was doing some kind of cool things in our game with Brobnar, but it was still sort of what you were describing, like putting a little pressure, removing a little bit of stuff, not really the big blowout sort of
And
things.
you certainly did get the big blowout, right? Like, you used Brobnar to win the game with Loot the Bodies until I stole it from you.
Yep.
I just want to remind you of that because you seemed like you were getting happy, and I was like, no, we can't have that.
Not on this podcast.
All right, well, let's move into the meat of the episode, and today I want to start talking about each of the houses, what their strengths are, what they lend to decks, and today I want to talk about Untamed. So let's start, before we get into individual cards, just kind of like our general thoughts on Untamed. So we both seem to put them about the same level. Like, they're strong, but we don't consider them to be the strongest. Are you generally happy when you open a deck that has Untamed in it?
It's kind of neutral to me. I'm not a huge fan of the Untamed, like, theming. So that doesn't really speak to me, and the cards are fine, but to me, they feel a lot of times kind of vanilla. A lot of times they don't feel as flashy to me as my beloved Mars or Brobnar cards that are
So would you say something like
crazy stuff all over? And so
I'm not a Magic player, but it still seems like they're kind of like Green in Magic, where it's like they've got some big dudes that are pretty good. I'm not actually sure I agree with that. Maybe Brobnar is more like Green in Magic.
Yeah, I get that feeling a little bit. I think that there's a little more interesting stuff going on with Untamed than what I remember from when I played Magic in middle school of Green. Um,
Yeah, and I'm talking about like 20 years
I
ago
know
when I
that
played.
yeah, I know that Magic players are going to watch this and be like, Green has such cool combos,
Yeah.
don't you know about blah blah blah
Because
blah
they're
blah.
idiots.
But yeah. Anyway, so when I open Untamed in a deck, I'd say that I'm mildly disappointed because it means it's not one of the flashier factions, but I'm not gonna throw the deck out or anything.
Gotcha. I would say my immediate reaction of opening Untamed is this is probably going to be a good thing. Like, there are definitely Untamed decks that I've looked at and I've went, wow, this is a disaster. But in my opinion, there's enough impactful cards where, generally speaking, I feel like I'm probably going to be okay. But like we both said before, I don't feel like it's going to drive the deck. Like, if it's the best faction, if it's like Untamed Brobnar Mars, I will throw the deck out and be like, nope, not even going to really look at that deck, not interested. But if it's, even if it doesn't have shadows, let's say it's like Sanctum, Untamed, Logos, I'd say, yeah, I have a good feeling about this deck. Like, I think this deck has a real legit chance of being good. Let's take a close look at it. Okay,
Yeah.
so what role do you feel like this deck generally best plays? Do you feel like its cards are putting out good creatures, it has good actions, it's putting pressure on the board? Like, what do you generally find yourself using these cards for?
I feel like the sort of flashiest effect and what I tend to want to use Untamed for is big amber gain. They have a few cards like the Witch that you mentioned way earlier,
Yeah.
like
Let's stop and when we mention
Full
cards, say what they
Moon.
do. So the Hunting Witch is the
Sure.
card that says when you play another creature, gain 1, and what's critical to remember is it's not just like a come into play effect for that turn, but if that witch lives, it's just a million amber. Like, it's a must answer card for your opponent, and you gain amber the turn you play it. So I agree. I feel like that card is the biggest, flashiest card.
Yeah, then there's also similar effects like Full Moon is a action play for the remainder of the turn, gain 1 amber each time you play a creature. So just a single turn
Yeah.
version of the Witch. Also things like Fertility Chant, which gives you 4 amber, your opponent 2 amber, and the Pixie, where is that? The Dust Pixie, that is just a little tiny body, only 1 strength creature, but gives you 2 amber when you play it. So those sorts of things are I sort of look towards. The sort of things I want Untamed to do in my sort of deck.
Yeah, I agree. When I'm playing Untamed, what I'm hoping is that I'm going to get some really good amber gains. I'm also hoping I'm going to get 1 to 2 cards that let me sort of cheat the game, and that is make keys out of the key forging step, especially if I'm playing Shadows or I'm like in a meta where I know I'm playing Shadows, which I believe is called every meta. I feel like those cards are really strong. I also am looking for the really good come into play effect creatures. I don't feel like Untamed is really good at making a board and then like fighting with that board. I feel like Sanctum just wrecks them, Brobnar destroys them. So I'm really looking for the creatures like Hunting Witch that come in, they give me stuff that, who's the guy, the Tiger, the Mighty Tiger that comes in.
Yeah, the Tiger's
Does
pretty
4
good.
damage. Yeah, Lupo the Scarred. He comes in, he does 2 to an enemy creature, and he's got a pretty big body. Just all these guys that when they come into play, they do something good. I feel like that's the real strength of Untamed. I feel like a lot of people look at cards like the Ancient Bear and get excited. And the Ancient Bear, to me, I can't stand the Ancient Bear. I'm like, he doesn't do anything when he comes into play. He's not quite big enough to have a huge effect. Your other guys are small, so they're going to die anyway. So if you call Untamed to attack with the Ancient Bear, that's probably your only creature. Like, you're just not doing enough. Where if you wanted to have an attacking creature deck, something like Sanctum, where these guys all have 6 strength and 2 armor, you're going to be able to get a board of dudes, right? Where you can just every turn be like, I don't have any Sanctum cards in my hand. I don't care. Sanctum. I'll kill your 3 guys. I'll reap for 3. Next turn. I don't feel like you can do that with Untamed.
Yeah, I've definitely seen board. Yeah, I'll sometimes play out a big Untamed board, and it seems impressive because it's a lot of creatures, but they're all 3 strength usually, maybe 4.
Yeah.
I will say, have you ever played with or against a deck with the Bear Flute?
I don't even know what the Bear Flute is.
So the Bear Flute goes into another theme of Untamed that I think is interesting to consider, is that they have a decent amount of recursion, getting cards from your discard pile back into play. And the Bear Flute is an artifact that you can use to fully heal an Ancient Bear, or if there are no Ancient Bears in play, you search your deck and discard pile to put one into play.
Wow. And then it also says, if you do, shuffle your discard pile back into your deck. Which is, that can be a positive or a negative, so that's very interesting. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I've played against Flute before, and it gets, yeah, I think it's a rare.
Yeah,
it gets very annoying because they just always have an Ancient Bear if they want it.
Yeah. And let's talk about that recursion theme. I think that is one of the strongest parts of the deck. Regrowth can be incredibly powerful. Like Regrowth, it gives you an amber for playing it, and then you get a card from your discard pile. And so if you do crazy things like, say, get back that Dust Pixie that gives you 2, Regrowth just gave you 3 amber just playing a Regrowth. And then you play the witch, I don't, what's her name, Hunting Witch? No, that seems too obvious.
That's giving you Amber Reach.
Here we go. Witch of the
Hunting
Eye.
Witch?
When you
Witch
reap,
of the Eye.
So you reap, you get an amber, you return the card from your discard pile to your hand, and so you can keep cycling something like Regrowth. And so it's like every turn you're getting 3 because you can attack with that Dust Pixie, kill it, do the Regrowth. And so like I've played against someone who had 2 Witches of the Eyes out. It just feels like the game is over if you cannot kill Witch of the Eye. Like, she's one of those cards. So, saying that Untamed can have these crazy turns, where if you go, like, 2 Hunting Witches, 2 Witches of the Eyes, your turn, your opponent's just like, wow. If I can't kill that board, the game is essentially over at this point.
Yeah, Untamed feels more passive to me, where it's not really messing with your opponent's board that much. It's more, they'll play these tiny creatures with huge effects, like Hunting Witch and Witch of the Eye, that if you don't remove those, they're just going to gain so much amber.
Yeah. But the thing with Keyforge, you can usually remove them.
Yeah, and one of the things that I do like about Untamed is they have of really interesting, cool mass removal cards.
Yeah. Why don't you talk about some of them?
So we keep going on and on about how strong we think Shadows is.
Yeah.
Well, Untamed has Perilous Wild, which is a rare card, but it gives you an amber, and when you play it, it destroys each elusive creature.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how many, like, Shadows creatures there are that aren't elusive.
Yeah, there's a lot that have it.
Would easily wipe a big Shadows board.
The problem, of course, is it's very specific, right? And I think you're right. Like, in tournament play, a lot of people are going to have Shadows anyway, so I think you're right. That's going to end up being amazing. I can see a lot of people being annoyed at this card, though, right? They're like, my opponent has never had an elusive card in the 20 games that I've played, and it's just play for an amber. But you're right. In tournament play, that could be devastating. But Shadows doesn't really care about its board. It's the one thing, right? Shadows is like, oh, boo-hoo, you killed my creatures. I'll just win out of hand.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the exact mix of the Shadows deck, but it can definitely slow them down.
Yeah. I think my favorite thing about Untamed is that most of their removal, their mass removal, does not come with chains. It's like Lost in the Woods is really strong. You get an amber, you get to remove their 2 best creatures, and your 2 worst, or none if you don't have any, or only 1 if you have one. That can be really powerful. Nature's Call can be really powerful, returning up to 3 creatures to their owner's hands. So you did this to great effect against me, where you bumped my 2 best creatures to my hand. Then you bumped 1 to your hand, which allowed you to come back and have it come into play effect again, which triggered Hunting Witch again. And those kind of plays, I think, make Untamed really fun and powerful.
Yeah. I also really like... I just want to give a shout out to the Common Cold, because I think that card is thematically really great. You gain an amber, you play it, it's an action, you deal 1 damage to each creature, but you destroy all Mars creatures.
Yeah. Because that's their one weakness, is the Common Cold.
Yep. That's really... I'm going to hate that card because I'm going to play a lot of Mars.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you will.
Thematically, I think it's a lot of fun, and can combo really well with other cards they have, like Save the Pack, destroy each damaged creature, and gain a chain.
Yeah, that card...
you can really just wipe the board.
I've comboed that with Piranha Monkeys, which says play/reap, deal 2 damage to each other creature. And so I've had boards, like I played against them, they had like 12 creatures out. And I just went Piranha Monkeys, the pack. What is it, 1 chain you get for the pack?
Yeah, 1 chain.
Yeah, so I played that combo, wiped the board, put 2 creatures out, and took a single chain. And my opponent's just like, what just happened? Like, that is not even close to fair. Like, yep, nope, that's not fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, for me, it feels like an Untamed deck that has the right cards is a really strong deck. And then an Untamed deck that doesn't have the right cards, I feel like can be a really weak deck, right? It can end up being a bunch of low health creatures that have low impact on the board, some actions that aren't that great. But if I've got a deck with like several Hunting Witches and some board wipes and a couple Dust Pixies and Regrowths and the Witch of the Eye and Key Charges and bouncing cards, like suddenly... Oh, and we didn't mention my favorite of all, Mimicry. You get to copy your opponent's action card. Oh, you played a bait and switch earlier, and now you think you're totally free from any sort of bait and switches because I don't have shadows? Boom, I do now. I think Mimicry is really, really strong. And so basically, if I have a deck of the right cards, Untamed quickly becomes one of my very favorite factions. But that's kind of rare, right? It's generally going to be a mixture of some of your favorites and a mixture of some of the cards where you're like, yep, this is why Untamed is not in that top 2 category.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. Untamed has some cool effects, some cards I'm excited about, but overall, they're not one that I'm super looking out for. And it'll be interesting to see what cards my decks end up with. Who knows?
Yeah, I've bought a lot of packs already. I think I have like...
Pre-ordered a lot?
Yeah, I ordered a box, so that's like 12, and then 2 more is 14. I have to decide whether I'm returning the core set or not. If I don't, that's 16. I feel like in 16, I'll probably get 1 pretty good Untamed, which I'll be happy with.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. And I guess we should mention this. There's the deck Doomwind. Do you know the deck Doomwind by any chance?
I was reading a little bit on it, so I'll have you explain it and play.
Yeah, it's basically
play the audience.
The legendary deck. It's the best deck that we've seen yet, and it has Shadows and Untamed. And what makes it so strong is actually the Untamed portion of the deck. The Shadows is fine, but it's not a really strong Shadows. It has bait and switch, so it basically can do something like it has 3 Hunting Witches. So You can have these
Ugh.
insanely explosive turns where you go like 3 hunting witches, some other creatures. I picked up 9 amber in a turn. You take 2 away. I make a key, and you had taken 2 and gotten to like 8. So I make my key. Then I bait and switch you, and I'm like right back to making a key. And then I steal some more from you. And it's this really annoying deck. But what makes it actually so strong is it has a really strong Untamed portion. Like the Untamed portion of the deck is amazingly good.
It can't be tamed.
It cannot. You get 3 hunting witches in a deck, Neil, and you have a good deck.
That's going to be a fast deck.
Yeah. And I actually had a game where I had like 2 hunting witches and 3 other untamed cards in my first hand, and then like the next turn I drew the 3rd hunting witch, and they could only remove 1 of the other ones, and it was just the stupidest game ever. I won in like 4 turns, and the person is just like, this is dumb. And I was like, yeah, I'm never playing Doomwind again. Because this was really early when we hadn't quite realized, like, especially we only had 4 decks or 5 decks, and Doomwind was so much better than the other ones that it was just kind of like, okay, none of us are playing Doomwind, right? Because it's broken. Okay, cool. And now we have some decks that can kind of compete with it, but I still think that those 3 hunting witches are what make that deck just bonkers.
And it's interesting because, like, the thing that can stop that is shadows, right?
Yeah.
And stealing all of that crazy amber generation. And so it's tough because if we didn't have shadows as strong as it is, then a deck like Doomwind would run away even more with the game.
Yeah. We've had this discussion previously where so most people hate bait and switch and they think it's bad for the game, but I kind of think it's good for the game because, like, you need a way to punish the stuff like that play you had with Loot the Bodies, where you were like, I got 100 amber, and if a card like bait and switch doesn't exist, there is no punishment for ever doing that, right? Like, maybe you get hosed and you lose half of it, and you're like, ah, shucks, I didn't get to crush them in 1 turn. But with bait and switch hanging around, had I been playing shadows, you might have been like, ooh, I need to play this, but it's risky, right? And like, maybe I play that, and I stop there, and I stop at 8 instead of getting like 12 or whatever. And so, I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I think bait and switch is good for the game.
Yeah, I agree that type of effect is good for the game. I think we'll have to wait and see if it was a little overtuned and is maybe a little too strong of that version of an effect, but I'm glad that something like it exists.
Yeah, I agree. I think as everyone gets better at the game, it will feel less powerful. I think there'll just be less times where people go, they haven't played a bait and switch yet, they're shadows, I'm going to roll the dice, right? Like, I think people will just roll the dice less and just be a little less greedy. I'll get 8 instead of 14.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see how that works out. All right, Neil. Well, thanks so much for coming on to Welcome to the Crucible this week. You seem like an Archon who is definitely improving every week. It was fun playing with you, as always. The cool thing about Neil is when we played our game, he didn't even look at his deck. He's just a good card player. And he was like, I got Mars. I'm sure there'll be an awesome combo in here. And I was like, hold on. I need to look at my deck. And he's like, only chumps look at their decks. So I essentially cheated him by looking at my deck. But Neil's a great card player, so I always enjoy playing with him. And hopefully we will get more of his insights here on Welcome to the Crucible. And thanks so much for coming on, Neil.
Happy to join, as always, and hopefully see you again soon.
Is there anywhere on the internet you want to point people to where they can find you?
No, not right now. I don't have a big social media presence or anything like that, so I'll see people back here, and if I do start tweeting or doing other streaming stuff, then I'll certainly let you know.
Neil, you could theoretically just tweet out every sandwich you eat and be like Neil's lunch tweets, and there you go. That could be what you
Neil's real meal.
Neil the real meal. I like it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Maybe we'll start that.
Look forward to Neil the Real Meal's tweeting of all of his lunches. You can find me at Tiny Grimes Games on Twitter. I may start putting hilarious things that my daughters say on there. I did yesterday. So if you want to see that, check that out. Yesterday, I was trying to educate my 3-year-old, and I said, so what does water become when it turns solid? And she got really excited, and she goes, fire! And I was like, we have more work to do. But that was interesting. So they say crazy things all the time. So who knows? Maybe I'll add some more of those. But you can find out when I'm streaming live at Tiny Grimes. Look for Tiny Grimes on YouTube, which is where you found this to start with. So, yeah. And if you haven't reviewed the show on iTunes and you like the show, you should do that. If you hate the show, I mean, you could do that, but you don't have to. You don't have to. Don't worry. Neil, you don't have to review the show if you don't like it. All right. Well, we will see you next time. And until then, Archons, keep begging FFG for a release date. We'll see you later.
Yes, please. Bye.